An anthem by one of the greatest iconic bands of the rock era was actually inspired by a cartoon character on the telly. The story of ACDC's hell-raising Dirty Deeds Done Dirt Cheap, next on Professor of Rock. Hey music junkies, Professor of Rock, always here to celebrate the greatest artists and the greatest songs of all time. Make sure that you subscribe below, especially if you love the golden era of popular music, the rock and roll era. Be a part of exclusive interviews and stories of the songs and the albums. You're gonna love it. Look us up on Patreon as well to be a part of curating this grand history and for more content. You know, we live in a society that is easily bristled. People are offended or get their feelings hurt at the slightest provocation. Sometimes you have no idea what you did or said, but you have upset somebody, regardless of intentions. You have to be really careful to think through every syllable before you even open your mouth. We're constantly walking on eggshells, if you will. When you reflect back on many of the most popular rock songs, many of them would be deemed inappropriate and shunned in today's climate. It's crazy. The ACDC catalog is full of songs that are like that. Brazen, provocative, and morally questionable. Isn't that what rock and roll is all about?
She was a fast machine, she kept the motor clean, she was...
That's one of the big reasons why we love them and why they epitomize the rebellious spirit of rock and roll. In fact, I would argue that if thousands of years from now, the history of 20th century rock and roll or the music itself was somehow lost to future generations, which is entirely possible. And if you had to explain what rock and roll is or was to that new generation, I just have them put on headphones and either play Van Halen's first album or just about anything from ACDC. I mean, ACDC is straight up rock and roll. They are more than your typical heavy band. They were rock and roll personified. I mean, the Bon Scott years? Are you kidding me?
Party time! My friends are gonna be there!
So great, it was almost unfair to other bands. They had all the classic elements that the best of the best had, but they just added more ingredients to the recipe and without taking themselves too serious. And they created a bona fide formula that was so recognizable. I mean, within seconds of hearing any AC/DC song, whether on the radio or in a stadium, in a TV or film, you instantly recognize the band. All of this equated to exuberance within the audience, within the listeners, that we never quite felt before. That's how I feel. This band was hilarious. They were also intense, rebellious, angry, and passionate. They ignored decorum, pursuing the most primal and natural urges known to man. It was never to disrespect anyone. They were just keeping it real, following their instincts, challenging the status quo. Blame it all on an older sibling of ACDC's Angus and Malcom Young, on how the outrageousness began. It was actually big sister Margaret Young who had a sewing machine that read ACDC on the back. You think about it, if Margaret didn't have that sewing machine, maybe one of the most iconic and best-selling rock bands in history wouldn't have existed under any name. Margaret was also the person that gave Angus the idea to wear his famous schoolboy uniform on stage. It's funny how legends are made. Even more humorous is often what inspires a future rock anthem. In the case of AC/DC's Dirty Deeds Done Dirt Cheap, the inspiration was a shady character from an animated cartoon series. Dirty Deeds Done Dirt Cheap was the title track to their third studio album in 1976. By that time, the group had released their first two albums in Australia only, High Voltage in early 75 and TNT in late 75. Their first international release was christened as High Voltage, but it contained tracks from both early records. When Dirty Deeds Done Dirt Cheap was finished, their American label actually refused to release it stateside. More on that in a second. Dirty Deeds Done Dirt Cheap was written by the Young brothers Angus and Malcom and the late, great Bon Scott. It was produced by Big Brother George Young and Harry Vanda. Angus got the song title from the cartoon series Beanie and Cecil. That was aired on the ABC television network from 59 through 62, I believe. It was revived in 1988, actually, as the New Adventures of Beanie and Cecil.
Hey, kids, it's time for the Beanie and Cecil Show.
Beanie and Cecil was primarily a children's show, but it contained some references that satirized current events and popular personalities of the day that many adults found entertaining, much like The Simpsons are today. As a young boy, Angus loved the villainous character in the cartoon whose name was Dishonest John. He carried a business card with him that read, "Dirty deeds done dirt cheap, holidays, Sundays, and special rates."
Time to do my bad deeds for the day.
Angus, Malcolm, and Bond transposed the spirit of Dishonest John into their own unsavory character, actually a hitman who invites people to contact him to solve their darkest problems. Dirty Deeds Done Dirt Cheap lists a menu of the measures the narrator will use to take care of those dirty deeds. Concrete shoes, cyanide, TNT, neckties, contracts, and high voltage. It actually says it all on this shirt. You can get it below, I'll link to it. Two of the services are the titles of ACDC's first two LPs, High Voltage and TNT. Dirty Deeds Done Dirt Cheap is lighthearted danger, not to be taken literally unless you're an uptight, sanctimonious square. ACDC's Bogardian mystery drama begins with an edgy Angus guitar riff and Malcolm's tantalizing rhythm shuffle. The band used a backing track of heavy breathing to underscore the song's sinister plot, just a stroke of studio genius by co-producers Harry and George. Bon Scott's hexing vocal on Dirty Deeds is a pinnacle example of his trailblazing style. Bon Scott turned the slogan of a cartoon character into a menacing rallying cry with a twist of his larynx. Bon Scott, he was a genuine rock god, authoritative as a frontman, and he had a shot at being the all-time rock and roll GOAT. Had it not been for his untimely demise and the lack of vision by ACDC's distributors beyond Australia, and yet he's still in the conversation when talking about the greatest rock vocalist ever, even without the longevity.
Let me out of here!
So stop me if you've heard this one before. Atlantic Records did not like Bond's vocals. They didn't get him. Like I said, the label passed on releasing the record in the US on the first run. However, after the gigantic success of Back in Black, the label put out the Dirty Deeds Done Dirt Cheap album 5 years after its original release, and no surprise, it sold over 6 million copies. The title track shot to number 4 on the mainstream rock chart. It did this on the supersonic strength of the title track, as well as the AC/DC classics Big Balls, Problem Child, and Ride On. Jailbreak was on another version of the album. Big Balls is one of the band's most infamous compositions, of course featuring the great Bon Scott's deceptively clever lyricism. Using double entendres by using ballroom and costume parties to obviously reference his own,
And my balls are always bouncing, and my ballroom always full.
AC/DC has traveled the path before with the Jack and later on songs like Giving the Dog a Bone. However, Big Balls is by far their funniest attempt at innuendo. The song was controversial, not only with my parents and likely your parents back in the day, but it also caused a stir with critics who misunderstood the band's sense of humor. They thought it was crude perversity. And really, how many times has that happened in rock and roll? But as I said earlier, the powers that be at the label underestimated the great Bon Scott. I'm sure those executives at Atlantic Records in the mid-70s would have told us that timing is everything, but we know better. Much of the American audience was finally discovering the greatness of Bon Scott, but by the day of the domestic release of Dirty Deeds in 1981, he was long gone. A tragedy of just epic proportions. What a voice, so powerful.
Another red light street.
Dirty Deeds was a gateway to all the incredible AC/DC music that was fronted by Bon before Brian Johnson took over lead vocals after his death. Fans that were turned on to AC/DC by the Back in Black album discovered other rock classics, TNT, Whole Lotta Rosie.
Six. You can say she's got it all.
It's a Long Way to the Top.
It's a long way to the top if you wanna rock and roll.
Jailbreak, of course, and Let There Be Rock. So many classics. I want to quickly recognize our sponsor, Zenni Eyewear, right now. They're the glasses I rock every day. Make sure to go to zenni.com to design your own pair. Try them on virtually to see how you look before you buy them. And you just put in your prescription and they deliver them right to your door. Very rock and roll. Back to ACDC. The first time that ACDC performed Dirty Deeds for a national audience was on the TV show Countdown, which was a highly rated program in Australia that featured G-rated family-oriented content. ACDC's performance of Dirty Deeds with Bon Scott's leering singing style more than shook bewildered parents that allowed their kids to watch that particular episode. The punctuation mark, though, was Bon's famous scream at the end of the song. Probably scared the Sam Hill out of the little tykes watching that broadcast. The part of Dirty Deeds where Bond performing as the creepy assassin entices his potential client to just ring 362436 hey created quite a ruckus.
362436, hey!
Bond shouting hey after the last digit sounded like he was saying 8. And 362-4368 was an actual phone number in Australia in the 70s. A couple in Illinois also had those exact 7 digits and received a ton of prank phone calls. Some of them were lewd and crude. The couple sued ACDC for invasion of privacy, demanding that the band re-record the song using a different set of numbers. The band had a good laugh and refused to oblige. In the legal proceeding that followed, the court ruled against the suit in favor of ACDC. Chalk one up for freedom of speech there in this crazy, impetuous world of rock and roll. I've always loved the background vocals on this song. I mean, rebellious, animalistic, and juvenile. It truly sounds like a bunch of young juvenile delinquents planning a prank. It does. Classic ACDC. Combine that with the Scottish-born expat Bon Scott, who sounds like his larynx has been marinated for half a century in whiskey.
TNT!
The truth is, nobody sounds like Bon Scott. Nobody. I've never heard a singer get close to his sound. Have you? He is the original, and on this song, he's all over the place, and it brings so much unadulterated adrenaline to the big chords. Angus's solo, it's downright wicked. He sounds like he may not even reach the end of the phrase. The playing he does up the neck of the guitar at the end with the open string and the fretted notes is perfect for the song. I remember the first time I heard this song, I thought my radio was shorting out. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. It was the first ACDC song I heard. It was on our town's only rock and roll station. I must have been about 8 or 9 years old. I'd never heard anything like it, like I said. Luckily, the DJ said who it was, and I immediately put together a plan of how I could get my hands on a copy of this album. It proved to be a lot more difficult than I would have ever imagined. The only places that carried albums, be it records or cassettes, in the early 80s in my Idaho small town was a place called Thriftway, which is actually a drugstore. Had very little selection. And a place called Blocks, which only had top 40 albums of the day. The next time my mom went to Thriftway, I went along and I just scoured the shelves for AC/DC. Came up short. I found nothing. Finally got the guts to approach a clerk who looked like she was the same age as my grandma. I'd seen her before. She actually knew my mom. And I sheepishly asked her, excuse me, ma'am, I'm looking for a record by AC/DC. It's called Dirty Deeds Done Dirt Cheap. As soon as I said the album title, I knew I was in serious shiz. The prim and proper lady's eyes, I remember, they got big as saucers. Her voice became stern and fierce. Dirty Deeds? What kind of store do you think this is, young man? Where's your mother? I have a mind to tell her exactly what you're up to here. Just then, as luck would have it, my mom walked up behind me and this lady went into the lecture of the century. The part that stands out to me to this day is when she asked my mom, and I'll repeat it now word for word with every little nuance. do you know what this band ACDC stands for? Do you know what ACDC means? It means Antichrist Devil Cult. Does your son want to be a Satan worshiper? This music is the gateway to that destination. It was hilarious. The entire way home, I tried to explain to my mom. I'm like, Mom, ACDC stands for currents and electricity, but she told me as long as I lived in her house, I would not be listening to devil music. Needless to say, I had to wait a long time before I got that particular ACDC album or any ACDC in the first place. I ended up trading a bunch of my best baseball cards to my friend's older brother in order to borrow his copy for just a few days. And I snuck my sister's new stereo that had the double cassette decks, and I recorded on a blank tape, and it was glorious. You know, Joan Jett, I remember, did a cool remake of Dirty Deeds Done Dirt Cheap in 1990. It peaked at number 36 on the Hot 100, and it went pretty high on mainstream rock. Perhaps the most bizarre version of this song was Leslie Gore's surf rock flavored cover on the 2002 compilation When Pigs Fly, songs you never thought you'd hear. She's right. No one ever imagined Leslie Gore would sing an ACDC song, let alone Dirty Deeds. Gore was most famous for her rendition of It's My Party that was the number one hit back in 1963. It's my party and I'll cry if I want to, cry if I want to. Dirty Deeds Done Dirt Cheap was a centerpiece of a hilarious 2008 episode of The Simpsons where Homer liked ACDC and Ned preferred the Christian tribute band ACDC and their comical pious spin on the track reversing the title to Kindly Deeds Done for Free.
I like the Christian cover band, ACDC. Kindly Deeds Done for Free.
The track was also used as the theme song for the 1998 movie Dirty Work starring SNL alumnus Norm Macdonald. Great guy. The song it's just an all-time classic of the rock music canon. I mean, decades later, it's a stark reminder of the raw and incredibly potent voice of one Bon Scott, the spectacular guitar riffs of one Angus Young, along with brother Malcolm, Mark Evans on bass, and the mighty Phil Rudd on drums. Dirty Deeds, of course, has become a stadium rocker. It's kind of strange, though. It doesn't really fit like the other ones do. It's no surprise, though, as ACDC has quite a few classics that you hear at any sporting event. They definitely hold the record for the most songs used in sporting events from one band. And it makes sense why their songs work so well in the massive stadiums with thousands of sports fans. I think it's the energy, the seismic sing-along rock and roll chants that raise their epic anthems to a level of superiority.
I tell you folks, it's harder than it looks. It's a long way.
It seems like every year they continue to add to their already exalted legend. ACDC, we salute you. Leave us a comment about this legendary band and this amazing album and song. What are your memories of hearing this band for the first time? I want to hear that for sure. If you like our content, we do invite you to subscribe to be a part of our music celebration, this community. To get this album or this ACDC shirt, it's a Dirty Deeds Done Dirt Cheap shirt. Look at our links below. Hit Zenny.com for glasses and check us out on Patreon for even more content. Help us keep the music alive. Until next time, 3 chords and the truth, my friends. Stay safe.